Happy Tuesday, Hokie Nation. Welcome back to another edition of the TSL Basketball Show. As always, we're recording on Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026, from the Tech Solutions studio in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Today's video is brought to you by the Hokie Way. Remember to like, subscribe, and refer the show to a friend. As always, I'm Robert Bateman. Chris Coleman and David Cunningham are joined alongside me on set, and behind the scenes is the one and only Nick Brown. Guys, men's basketball is currently 18-11. They're 7-9 in the ACC, 54th in the net, and 12th in the ACC overall. Only one game for the Hokies since we last talked, and it was a 7-point loss to UNC, 89-82 on the road.
They played a good game against a top 20 team on the road, and just UNC's unbeaten at home this year. You know, those games are tough to win. So if they don't make the NCAA tournament, again, it's not going to be because they lost to UNC. It's not going to be because they lost to a top 20 Miami team on the road by a point. It's going to be those early season games that is going to get them.
I thought they played really, really well in the first half. It was 44 all at half. Both teams were pretty good offensively, and I thought you saw Virginia Tech really play solid defense and then capitalize it. Felt like Tech got to the rim pretty easily on the other end. And then in that second half, Carolina kind of tightened up its defense a little bit, and Virginia Tech just went through a couple spells. And really, I thought the difference was Henry Vesar. You know, he's UNC's 7-foot center, and he stayed out of foul trouble. And on the other side, he opened the second half by hitting his first 7 shots, including a 3. And that 3 put him up 11. And it really just got to the point where Tech didn't really have a matchup inside for him. I thought the foul trouble played a bigger role in this game than maybe any other game this season, in part because of that matchup with Vesar. Amani Hansberry picks up his 3rd foul with about 3.5 minutes to go in the first half. Mike Young put him back in, and he got his 3rd. It was on a defensive rebound, and the Carolina guy, he kind of got tangled up with him. But then he picked up his 4th about 4 minutes into the second half, and as a result, Tech has to kind of ride with Antonio Dorn and Christian Gerdak for good chunks of the second half. And I thought those guys were okay, but you're playing probably an all-ACC player in Vesar, and he's really hard to handle, and he can step out and shoot it. And Carolina got hot, and they shot really, really well in the second half, and Tech hung around, but wasn't really up to par on offense. Mike Young talked about they went through some offensive lulls, and really he didn't think the shot selection was very good, and that surprised him a little bit, given that this group has, over the last couple games, has played pretty well offensively. You look back to that Clemson game, the Hokies have shot 50% or better in 4 of their last 5. The outlier is Florida State. They shot 50% in this game, but you're going to have to be a little bit better on both ends to beat a top 20 team on the road that has not lost at home this year.
I think they were pressing offensively a little bit in the second half because UNC was scoring at will, and they felt like they had to keep up with them. I think that was a big part of it. Toby Lowell, first half, was like he was playing NBA Jam out there. I mean, he was his own character on NBA Jam. Yeah. That was crazy. Tech has struggled to stop that pick and roll all season. And, I've talked about how they don't block very many shots. They're like 205th in the country or something like that in block shots. Like their centers lack vertical ability, but they also lack lateral movement to stop that pick and roll. And I think Hansberry's got it, but when he gets in foul trouble, Dorn and Gerdak don't have the lateral ability to get to the spot. Even if they read it, they're not quite quick enough to get there, and Tech is getting burned with that over and over again. So, that's an issue that'll have to be fixed in the offseason. I think assume Hansberry will play the 4. Let's just assume nothing changes. Mike Young's the coach.
Next year.
Yeah, next year. Hansberry's still here. All that. He would play the 4 next year, and Tech would, I think, ideally get an athletic 5 to pair with Gerdak, somebody who can do a little bit better job, moving his feet and getting in front of those runs to the basket like that. So they are who they are right now. They're a little bit limited from that standpoint. And offensively, you know, on the whole, that they were good. I mean, their offensive efficiency rating went up, 6, 7 spots or something like that after that game. They were, even with, you know, a few issues in the second half, I mean, they scored plenty of points in that game. They just couldn't get those stops.
Yeah, and I thought, you mentioned the pick and roll. I thought when Hansberry came off the floor, you know, Tech had hedged the ball screen a little bit earlier and forced Carolina to rotate and shoot threes. Tech didn't really double Vesar, maybe like once. Kind of played him one-on-one, and even like I thought Gerdak did an okay job against him in that first half. But in that second half, they got him, UNC got him in better spots. And when Tech didn't have Hansberry on the floor, it was easier for him to attack. And Seth Trimble got downhill and got going in that second half. And Carolina shot 20 free throws in the second half. And even during that 7 or 8 minute cold spell the Hokies went through in that second half when they weren't scoring really offensively, the only thing that was happening really on either end was Carolina was getting to the foul line, and it kind of just extended the margin. And when Carolina shoots 30 free throws and Virginia Tech shoots 11, even if you shoot 50% and have 9 or 10 more shots than them, it's really hard to overcome. And Mike Young was very frustrated after the game about the fouls because Hansberry fouls out and Vesar picks up 1. It's like, that's, you know, you need your best players on the floor. And some of those fouls Hansberry committed were not very smart fouls, but at the same time, not all of them. So it's one of those things where you go on the road, you're in an uphill battle, you know it's going to be very, very difficult to win, and it is. And as we've talked about, as Chris said at the beginning, you know, it's not going to be this game you're going to point to at the end. It's one you'd like to have, sure, but you know, when the SMU, the Miami games, when you're leading with a minute to go, those are the ones that if you have, you're probably in the tournament right now.
Christian Gerdak, Amani Hansberry, and Antonio Dorn all combined for 10 fouls throughout the game. Virginia Tech, a perfect 11 for 11 from the charity stripe. I wanted to talk a little bit about Neo scoring 19, leading all scorers for Virginia Tech, and Toby Lawal and Ben Hammond right behind him. It felt like, and you guys kind of touched on it, this was a really complete offensive performance, and it was just UNC making shots that kind of let the Hokies down.
It was one of Tech's most complete offensive performances of the year, and I think if you stack that up with the Wake Forest game before it, I definitely think they're making strides on that end of the court. I think the last 4 games, Neo's been back to his old self. I don't know his exact stats, but his shooting percentage is way up. He's gotten some good assists out there, and his turnover numbers overall are down. So he's playing pretty good ball for the Hokies right now. And I think, you know, that injury, you know, we talk about Lowell missing those games, and we talk about Tyler Johnson missing most of the season. I actually think that the biggest injury Tech has had this year was the one he played through. Of Dallas. Because, you know, we've seen the last 4 games we've seen the last 4 games and then the beginning of the season that he's capable of much, much more than he was doing in that, 10-game stretch or so where he was really struggling. And, you know, it goes back to that injury and it changed his shot. And you remember Mike Young saying they wouldn't let him do individual drills in practice because they just wanted to keep him healthy enough to do the regular practice to prepare for the opposition and things like that. So I think that's had as big an impact as those other 2 injuries, to be honest with you. But, you know, he was able to play through it because it wasn't a broken bone like the other 2 guys. But, you know, I think we're starting to see right now, you know, what he's capable of as a player. He played a good game the other night, but it's just it's probably going to be too little too late.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. I think we talked about this last week, Rob. He is getting the ball and he's making the decision immediately. It's kind of like he's just playing.
And without forcing it. He's found the happy balance.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like he's comfortable. He didn't look comfortable in January. Part of that is when you open – your second ACC game is against a team like Wake Forest that is showing a defense you haven't seen, and they turn you over 7 times in the first half. Like, he got very, very frustrated very quickly, and I think at the beginning of January you started to see maybe Tech is a little bit better at times when Avdalas is off the floor. But it's funny. We talked about this last week. Hey, maybe, that Miami game, like if Dallas was off the floor for the final couple minutes, Mike Young didn't really play him. Maybe Tech's better with him off the floor. But you see these last two performances, and he's played really well. And it's like if you get that version of him, Tech is really good when he's on the floor. But the problem is he hasn't been there all year, and whether that's injuries or whatnot. And I go back to, Mike Young has continued to, and the staff have continued to have to kind of tweak and reinvent themselves all year. It's like Amani Hansberry, Antonio Dorn sits out that first game because of a suspension, and then Amani Hansberry misses a game because he's dealing with an injury. He's held out like the third game of the year, and then Abdallas picks up his little knock, and he's not fully healthy, and then Lawal goes down, and then Johnson goes down, and then Bedford's out for a game, and then Lawal comes back, Dorn comes back, Johnson still hasn't come back, but it's like Abdallas is still dealing with an injury, and they should be better than they are, but at the same time, Abdallas going through the cold stretch, Hammond went through the hot stretch at the same time, so you kind of shift duties to where Hammond's the primary ball handler and Abdallas is playing off the ball. And it's like this puzzle that's constantly changing, and it's like they've almost got it a bunch of times and have not really fully got it. And I'm sure it's very frustrating for Mike Young and this coaching staff because you play as well as you do against a top 20 team on the road. Nick and I were sitting in here after the James Franklin podcast last night, and we were watching Duke hammer NC State. The Hokies, I know it was a 14-point game at the end of the game, but the Hokies played Duke close in Castle Coliseum. They were within 6 for most of that game. And it's just like, if you hung a banner for being within 6 against really
National
good teams, you'd be in the NCAA tournament, it wouldn't be close. But that's not the goal. The goal is to win games. And it's very frustrating because they have been so... They've probably been about 75-80% complete throughout the season. They haven't really played 100% a lot of times. And you go down to Chapel Hill, you go down to Miami, you go down to SMU, and it's like you win that game, and that's a stamp on your resume. And they've played well enough to be in the game and lead, but they have not been good enough to win at the end, and for a variety of factors. And it's difficult because at the end of the season, we're going to look back and go, they just need to win.
I want to circle back to Neo just quickly because I remember about a month ago, we talked about how Neo had a higher percentage of mid-range jumpers compared to getting to the rim. And I just feel like he's scoring at a much higher rate, especially inside the paint. Moving on, though, we saw a glimpse of, oh, yeah, David?
Well, I was going to say, he had a couple possessions in that, especially in that first half, where in earlier in the season, probably over the last month, he gets into those spots where he wants to back down his defender one-on-one. And I feel like he's not necessarily quick when he does it, but I thought against Carolina, you saw it in that first half where like he kind of just backed his defender down, put a little move on him, turned, got to the rim, and made a layup. And it's like he can get there when he's confident. You just didn't see him think that way over the last month. And I think it like him being healthy and a boost of confidence and a change of mindset, it's like he's a whole different player. And David Teal, we were texting about it yesterday, Sam Vecini from The Athletic put out a mock draft, listed the top 60 picks, his mock draft. And he did not have Abdallas listed. That was as of yesterday from The Athletic. I don't know that Abdallas will get picked, but I would still lean towards him leaving because I think he really wants to pursue that dream. But it'd be interesting if they could get him back.
Yeah, you need to think about it. Whether he gets picked or not, he's going to go to the combine again.
Yeah.
And you're not going to know whether he's going to stay or whether he's going to go. So let's say you're like, well, we're going to bank on him staying. So we're going to reserve X amount of money for this starter. And then you get to June and then he declares and you can't replace him at that point because everybody's made commitments, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think he's going to play for Virginia Tech next year simply because of that, because you can't afford to wait that long. in my opinion.
Yeah.
Tech could afford to wait on his decision last year because they didn't have anything to lose. Like they were coming off a 13-win season or whatever it was.
Yeah.
They didn't have much to lose. I mean, they were going to be a better team whether he signed or not. But next year, you're going to want to do better than this year. You're going to want to make the NCAA tournament next year. And you've got a good core coming back, at least in theory you do, if they're retained. So you can't afford to sit and wait. Like you need to figure out that part of your starting lineup as early as possible, and waiting around till June or whatever. It's just not in the cards, I don't think.
Yeah, and I think so. I was asked about this in a Q&A I wrote last week about the difference between Avdalis and maybe Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and I always thought Nickeil Alexander-Walker, his cousin Shea, obviously went to Kentucky and played, but I thought Nickeil was always in a really good situation because he was surrounded by a lot of veterans and did not have to necessarily be the star.
Yeah.
The only time he really had the ball in his hands all the time was when Justin Robinson went down with an injury. Nickeil was kind of forced into that ball handler role, and he and Wabisa Beatty kind of shared ball handling duties for that time being when Robinson was off the floor. But outside of that, I don't want to say he was in a cocoon almost, but like he had so many good veterans around him that he didn't have to carry all this weight.
He had Virginia Tech's all-time assist leader on the court with him, right? And I'll still remember the best game I've ever seen a Virginia Tech basketball player play was the game Robinson broke the career assist record, and he also broke the single-game three-point record. I mean, he had 9 three-pointers that game against Syracuse. When you do that and you break the career assist record, and then you got a first-round pick over here standing in the corner doing nothing, right? Yeah. Because your point guard's just dominating. I mean, that was one heck of a basketball team. Of course, Justin Robinson got hurt the very next game after that, but that's another.
Yeah, but my point to Nickeil is that he knew he was coming back into a great situation. I think that made more sense, and I think we talked to Avdalis after the Wake Forest game, and I wrote about this. I think he still believes that he made the right decision coming to college because it's been eye-opening for him, and he's learned a lot, and it's a completely different style of basketball. It's more physical. And I think now that he's finally healthy, you're seeing the best of him, kind of like what you saw earlier in the year. But if you remember, there was a chance he almost went to the NBA. Like it seemed like a slim chance he was even going to come to college to begin with. And in my mind, I view this as he was always going to be one and done. And my guess would be he still goes. And to Chris's point from the Virginia Tech perspective, he's obviously a great player, and you would love to have him back. But from the simple fact of building your roster, you cannot really afford to wait around.
Same thing with Jalen Bedford. He might apply for the 6th year. What if it takes the NCAA 2 months to make up their mind?
Well, and I think that's a little bit different because if you get Bedford back, I feel like that's kind of like an added bonus kind of thing. Bedford's more replaceable than Avdalis is. Right. If Avdalis is coming back, you have to kind of carve out what things look like. And I think Virginia Tech, the style of which it's played this year, kind of all goes back to Avdalis. The pace, the faster pace at the beginning of the year. I was told that some of the assistant coaches had kind of convinced Mike to kind of play faster towards the beginning of the year, to maybe cater towards Avdalis a little bit because it was more of a up-tempo style, get out and run a little bit, more free-flowing. And I think you saw that earlier in the year. They were like before the Stanford game in January, they were 127th in tempo.
It's still, I think, the highest tempo Mike Young team has had.
But they've regressed to like in the 200s, like 220 now. Since that Duke game where they only had 57 or 58 possessions, they have played slow. And what you've seen is Ben Hammond is kind of, I think, the right fit as far as pace goes for this Mike Young team. And I don't know if Mike Young would say this out loud, but my guess would be having more consistency there, knowing exactly how you want to play starting next year. If you say Ben Hammond's my starting point guard and this is how we're going to play at this pace and
from the very beginning,
I think it would smooth a lot of things over and just provide another level of comfort. And it stinks because Dallas is a really good player, I think, and it just has not been exactly the season they wanted. So that's a long way of, I know we spent a lot of time talking about Dallas, but I think that's important to get across because I think he's been good at times, but he and Virginia Tech, the I don't want to call them struggles, but where Tech has maybe slipped up this year, the stylistic stuff, it's kind of gone hand in hand with Dallas. And I think when you bring in somebody with as much talent as that, you want to kind of cater to them a little bit. And it worked at times. It didn't work at times. And you combine that with everything else we mentioned, the injuries, and you're looking at a team that I think kind of knew its identity, but also kind of didn't for long parts of the season.
Yeah, well, the backcourt's definitely been a struggle just figuring out pairings and whatnot. We saw Tyler Johnson for 2 minutes. It obviously was a close game, so not a lot of room for him to run. But what do we think we'll see out of TJ for Boston College coming up?
I would guess you'll see increased minutes. You'll see more than 2. Maybe 5 to 8 tonight or something like that, and then a steady workload built up. Look, he's not going to ever get back to 25 to 30 minutes per game, Tyler Johnson. Not this year. It's too late for that, unfortunately. But he's a guy that can, if he can get back to 15 minutes a game, he's a guy who can definitely help you in a lot of ways.
Well, and I think it creates balance, a little bit more balance by you can take some other guys off the floor for a little bit longer. You add, I would argue, I mean, Mike Young would say Jalen Bedford is their best on-ball defender, but Tyler Johnson's right there with him, I think. And,
right.
And you essentially, you can play different lineups that you weren't able to play before that make you better defensively and better on the glass, where you might only get them for a 4-minute stretch, but they're different lineups than you've had over the last couple of games. Mike Young clearly wanted to play Tyler Johnson more, but I just think the situation, that's a tough situation to kind of throw him into. You're playing at North Carolina where every possession matters. And going back to the point I made earlier about shot selection, Jalen Bedford had that 3 very early, like 5 seconds into that shot clock.
And Mike Young took him out immediately.
He chucked it up. I think he airballed it.
He did.
And Mike Young yanked him. And not that I'm not saying Tyler Johnson would make that situation, but that just goes to show you. He
wouldn't have taken the shot.
Yes. But that goes to show you that every possession in that game was valued. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a situation where you want to get Tyler Johnson some run, but also like,
you got to try to win the game.
Yeah, and the problem is if it was like Seth Trimble, and Trimble was good, but if it was Trimble who had killed them, yeah, you could probably stick Johnson on him and like see if that worked for a little bit, right? When the problem is Vessar, he's a 7-foot post, and the problems you're dealing with are foul trouble inside. That's not necessarily a Tyler Johnson patched hole kind of thing. So I expect to see him a lot against Boston College, more maybe 12 to 15 minutes. And then I think against Virginia, I think as Virginia Tech continues to play more games, his minutes will only continue to ramp up, and he just provides a comfort level for everyone. Like you see it on the floor, everyone just looks more like relaxed, honestly, with him playing, because it's like, oh, you know he's going to be a good defender, you know he's going to be a good rebounder, and you know he's going to take good shots.
He has that Tony Allen effect where he's just out there, and guys know defensively you don't necessarily have to lock in as much, because at the end of the day, Tyler Johnson will probably guard the best player offensively for the opposing team.
Yeah, like if this was a video game and you were rating his stats, like speed, rebounding, shooting, blah, blah, blah. He doesn't have an A in any category, but he doesn't have anything worse than a C in any category either. He's going to be probably your most consistent guy you put out there.
Across the board.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk some bracketology. Per Joe Lenardi, VT is currently the last team and his first 4 out. According to Bracket Matrix, the Hokies are in 10 out of 105 brackets they track with. 2 games left for VT, BC at home, and then at UVA. Seems like the Hokies have no choice but to win out. I actually, before we get into this, a fun note, New Mexico, who is currently last 4 in, plays Colorado State and at Utah State to close the season. So Brandon Rexsteiner and MJ Collins have a chance to help the Hokies out.
They certainly do.
I mean, it's simple. You can't lose tonight to Boston College, and it's a late one, 9 o'clock. Mike Young's 1-6 against Boston College, and BC played Wake really, really tough last week. Drew Karras had 38, and BC still won. This is a really, really ugly BC offense. This is a top 75 BC defense. But the Hokies have to win this one. You can't. No bones about it. You just got to go in there and win, and I think they will. You honestly just have to mentally lock in and prepare. And Mike Young talked about it the other day and said it doesn't really appear to be a problem. Then you got to go to Virginia and win. But you have to win. You should have beaten Miami, could have beaten Virginia, couldn't beat North Carolina, excuse me. And now you've got to go to Virginia, John Paul Jones, close the season. You got to win. That's it. And it really sucks because I feel for the fans, because Virginia Tech has for so long been, so many years, especially under Seth Greenberg, you're a bubble team, you're right there, and you're in this position again. And a lot of the other bubble teams have lost over the last couple.
So Tech actually moved up from the next 4 out to the first spots. 4 out, despite losing.
Because Virginia Tech has played Carolina close.
Right, and Cal lost to Pitt at home. Wow.
Cal beat SMU and then lost to Pitt. Oof. It almost did what Virginia Tech did, beating Clemson, losing to Florida State. Right. Except Florida State
is a lot better than Pitt.
Auburn, who's 1-7 in their last 8 games, is finally out of projections after sitting in the first 4 in for quite some time as well.
Yeah, and the bracketologies, they're fluid. They're changing constantly based on who's playing. But the real bummer is that the opportunity is there for Virginia Tech. If you have one more win, we're talking SMU, Miami, even Wake Forest on the road at the beginning of January. Another quadrant 1 win, you are probably in the field right now.
Stupid Syracuse. I blame Geo Heater. Look, they
you can blame Rob too.
That's right. They were top 75, and then they've tanked it their last 2 or 3 games. Not only lost, but gotten hammered, and have now dropped out.
Yeah.
So it'd be helpful if they could.
I would like to say I did predict the Syracuse slide, however.
No, I mean, I could have told you that. They're not great, and they're probably gonna have a new head coach along with a new AD. But the math is simple here, Rob. It's like you got to go to Charlottesville and win, and that would be something if Virginia Tech men's and women's basketball both swept Virginia in the same season. I don't know that it will happen. The women obviously did it, and we'll talk about that in a sec. But the men won in JPJ last year. It was the first time since 2017-18. It just does not happen. And Ryan Odom he's got a really good team on his hands, and I think Virginia, it's going to be such a very difficult game. The Hokies are capable, but again, as we've seen, it takes more than playing 35 good minutes of basketball. You've got to play all 40, and then maybe
sometimes all 55.
All 55, as we saw back in New Year's Eve against Virginia.
Yeah, so obviously we've seen multiple close losses from the Hokies this season, but with how well they've played some of the best teams in the ACC, I think VT could be a dark horse for the ACC tournament, because right now the Hokies would play Wake Forest day 1 and then Clemson day 2, who Virginia Tech have both beaten those teams.
Yeah,
and Clemson would be a quad 1 win.
Yes. So you're not necessarily out of the woods yet, but it's one of these things where there's always going to be somebody stealing somebody's spot in the NCAA tournament. There's going to be some bid stealer. You don't want to be on the outside, period. Yeah, there's still a chance to make a little bit of a run, and Clemson slid a little bit as of late, beat Louisville the other day, and that was a huge win. I believe they've got Carolina today or tomorrow, and then they've got And then, Carolina obviously closes the season against Duke. I forget who Clemson closes the season with. Maybe it's like Georgia Tech. But
nailed it.
There we go. But you're getting a team, I think, in Clemson that's a pretty good matchup for you.
Yes.
And you just hammered Wake Forest. So, yeah, you can put some things together. I think if you get a good matchup, very much like the women, I think the women have a great draw. But at the same time, you don't want to rely on the ACC tournament because there's only so much you can do. Really, I would say the gem, the golden opportunity is on Saturday in Charlottesville. If you can beat Virginia, a top 16 team right now, a team that's going to be a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. You've already beaten them once. Can you beat them again? If you can beat them, you're probably in the NCAA tournament. But it's easier said than done, of course.
Yep, nothing to add to that.
All right, awesome. So up next is up next for VT is Boston College. They are 3-13 in the ACC and 1-9 on the road this season. I don't know about you guys, but when a game looks like an easy win on paper, I personally start freaking out because I feel like that's just where teams always slip up.
Yeah, well, I feel good about this when it's at home. Wake lost to them the other day. That was at BC, right? Yeah, I mean, they've only won 3 ACC games this year. The motto of Boston College men's basketball is, hey, at least we're better than Boston College women's basketball, right?
Yikes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the women just fired their coach.
Did they?
So, they should win, Rob, but Boston College and Earl Grant and Mike Young go back to the days when Mike Young was at Wofford and Earl Grant was at Winthrop. And they used to scrimmage each other and stuff over the summer because they're in close proximity. And Earl Grant at Boston College is just giving Mike Young fits for whatever reason. And BC was the last team Mike Young had ever beaten in the ACC. He had beaten literally everyone else except for Boston College. BC's just that team. If you're around Will Stewart, just ask him about what Boston College means in his mind, and he will give you a very long rant about just how much he hates BC. This is a game that the Hokies should win, but it's BC. You never know. They can give you fits, and they're going to be pretty good defensively. The Hokies just kind of have to stay composed a little bit, and it could be a very physical game.
Yeah, if you're Boston College, you want to make it as physical and ugly as possible. A lot of fouls, stop the flow of the game, all that stuff. It's like a soccer team, lower table, playing a big team. Just you want a bunch of fouls. You want to throw them out their rhythm and things like that. I think Earl Grant's a good coach, but if you recall a couple months ago after football season, the BC athletic director released a statement and said, hey, we're going to fully fund rev share next year. So that's one of the reasons BC is so bad across the board in their major sports right now, is because they're not fully funded when it comes to revenue sharing.
Well, and then the final game of the regular season on March 7th, as VT heads to Charlottesville to take on UVA. The Hokies won the barn burner inside Castle Coliseum in triple overtime. How do we feel for Virginia Tech on the road?
I mean, we saw what UVA did, or what Duke did to UVA, but Duke's on a different level, man. There's 4 or 5 teams in college basketball this year that just look like they're way ahead of the field, right? And then Duke is one of them. UVA is really good. They have 3 losses?
UVA has 4 losses. One of them is to Virginia Tech.
Right.
And since December 31st, when the Hokies beat them, they've lost twice.
Right.
Once at home to Carolina and once on the road to Duke.
Right.
That's the list.
Yeah. So they've lost 1 home game this year. So, I mean, you wouldn't bet on it, right? And that's nothing against Virginia Tech. It's just only UNC has been able to go to Charlottesville and win this year. And that was a game that Virginia led, right, David? And UNC had a pretty big comeback.
Yeah.
UNC is like the comeback kings. They did the same thing to Duke.
To Duke, yeah. It's possible, but you're just going to have to play a really, really, really mistake-free game. And if you recall, the last time Hokies played UVA, they didn't have Antonio Dorn, Tyler Johnson, or Toby Lawal, and
true.
Still won. You're playing them this time.
They've got Jakari White.
With everyone.
Last time.
UVA has Jakari White. So you're also playing them in JPJ, and that's a really just difficult place to win. If the Hokies rebound well and play good defense, they'll have a chance. But the problem is when you saw this against Carolina in the Dean Smith Center, when you play a team on the road, especially a team like Carolina or UVA or even Duke, we saw it against NC State too. Like, they just make a couple buckets and that place just gets rocking, and all of a sudden your back's against the wall and you feel the pressure and you tense up. And you mentioned earlier, you press a little bit. And I thought you saw the Hokies press a little bit in that second half, uncharacteristically maybe even. That's something you have to avoid. And last year in JPJ was almost such an anomaly because the Hokies went in there and played so well and almost controlled that entire game. Usually, in my experience, when the Hokies go to JPJ for men's basketball, it has been a Virginia really almost chokes you out a little bit and you're kind of down and out in the first half. And only that there was that 20, I think it was the 21-22 Virginia Tech team when Aluma had an opportunity to kind of try to win it at the buzzer.
It was Aluma and Murphy.
Yeah. That team played them really, really close there, but just it's not given. And this is the tough part. It's you get to this point and you desperately need a win. And as we talked about, Carolina, UVA, not easy places to go do them.
Yeah, well, Virginia Tech back in action tonight, March 3rd at 9 p.m. inside Castle Coliseum, with the Hokies looking for a way into the Field of 68. This episode is brought to you by the Hokie Way.
This episode of the Tech Sideline podcast is brought to you by the Hokie Way. The Hokie Way supports student athletes in leveraging their name, image, and likeness to amplify the mission of charitable organizations as a way to give back to the community. Your contributions to the Hokie Way support Hokies NIL and are tax deductible. Visit thehokieway.org to learn more.
All right, now we get to talk about Megan Duffy's squad and Virginia Tech women's basketball. They're currently 22-8 on the year, 12-6 in the ACC, 41st in the net rankings, and 6th in the ACC overall. Only one game for women's basketball since we last talked, and it was a massive road win against UVA this past Sunday, 83-82, which saw Carly Wenzel drop a career-high 29 points.
Talk about a roller coaster, man. Hokies come out and they go up 10-2. At the end of the first, they're up 27-13. They led by 23 in the second quarter. And to Virginia's credit, Virginia hung around, ended the first half on a high note. They went to a 1-2-2 or a 3-2 zone that was funky and gave Virginia Tech a lot of fits, and climbed back into it and made a really big run in the third quarter, came all the way back in the fourth quarter, took the lead, and the Hokies made one more play than the Cavaliers did. Carly Wenzel gets fouled with 1.7 seconds left, makes 2 free throws to put Tech up 1, and then I thought Tech defended UVA's inbound from the sideline excellently, at the buzzer essentially, and Hokies get out of there with the road win, and that was a heck of a game. Lots of highs, lots of lows for both teams, but I thought that was kind of peak Virginia Tech women's basketball this year. Very gritty, very determined, very just, we're not going to let it. There have been times this year where Virginia Tech has kind of let another team's run affect them, and they've let the game get away a little bit. And UVA storms all the way back, takes the lead, and Tech punches right back and takes the lead right back. That's hard to do, especially on the road, and as a result, you get a huge win. You're the number 6 seed in the ACC tournament, and I really like how the bracket shapes up for them. And they've penciled themselves into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I'm glad the game ended when it ended. If it had been another minute with the way that game was going, I would not have liked Virginia Tech's chances. Look, you leave it to the last shot on a drive to the basket. Most of the time, the refs swallow their whistles and don't call anything. Like, I think Ben Hammond got fouled more the last play against Miami than Carly Wenzel did against UVA. I mean, Ben Hammond got tripped up and knocked down, and they didn't call it, right? Carly Wenzel, they called it. And that's the difference in those two basketball games, with the exception of the Miami game was close all the way through, and UVA was down big to Virginia Tech. Sometimes, you get down to those last second calls, and sometimes you get the benefit of the calls, and sometimes you don't. I think it was great to see him get the win. I can only imagine the meltdown of the fan base if Tech had lost that game, especially after a year of what's happened to the men's team. But even the women's team to a certain extent, because they had that lead against UNC, right? And they lost a fairly recent game. There might have been another one in there that I'm.
Well, they lost the Miami game.
The Miami game,
but then they did the opposite against Clemson.
Right,
they came back.
Right, exactly. So very fortunate to get that win because as the years go by, and you think back to the season, you just remember that you won the game. You don't remember how you won it.
People will remember that win at UVA, I think. I mean, especially because it was for a sweep. Hokies hammered them in Blacksburg, go to Charlottesville, and I thought Wenzel was terrific. She in that second half, she really kind of took over, as did Kimora Johnson for Virginia. They both really just got it going, and those are two of the ACC's best guards on display.
Great picture on the TSL homepage of the free throw going through, by the way.
Yeah. Wenzel, clutch. That's exactly what you need. And, Megan Duffy talked about it after the game. Just you put the ball in Carly's hands and kind of let her make a decision, and she can either pull it from three or try to drive and get a foul called. And I know there are a lot of fans that like to complain about, Carly Wenzel misses a lot of layups. Well, she gets fouled on a lot of layups, and sometimes they're called and sometimes they're not called. Right. And this was a case where Wenzel drives and tries to shoot a floater and is fouled and gets the foul called. And there have been a lot of times this season where you see it a lot, like in Castle. She drives to the rim and gets her arm completely taken out and there's no call. Mm-hmm. This case is probably one of the lighter fouls a little bit.
Right.
And they call it. And lucky for Virginia Tech, they did. And, and then she steps up, and she was 9 for 10 from the foul line, and she steps up and makes two free throws to kind of close it out. And her growth, man, from not only just this year, but from, when she came in redshirted, she's the only player in this program that
always be redshirted.
Yeah, she's the only player in this program that has any tie to the Final Four team. And you've seen her kind of turn into this player. We saw it at the very beginning of her career when she kind of locked up Caitlin Clark a little bit in that LI tip-off game and scored some big buckets. And that was the first time we really saw her blossom. And, as Megan Duffy's taken over, she's had a huge role in this transition. And, her and Karis Baker, I thought both of them were really, really good all season, but especially against UVA. And, career high 29 for Wenzel. In a game like that where you score the game-winning basket, and I thought both teams dealt with a lot of fouls. Kyla Freelon fouls out with about a minute 5 left. She had been dealing with foul trouble all game. Anaya Trent had 2. Cale Peterson had 2. And when UVA is so big, heavy, they just kind of bully you a little bit inside. And I thought, to Tech's credit, Tech kind of hung in there and took some punches and then was able to punch back on the other end, whether it was through Freelon or through Mackenzie Nelson, who had a double-double with 11 assists. Just made one more play than UVA did. And in a game like that, that's the difference. You make one more play.
That last second shot by UVA was interesting because Tech didn't guard the inbounds. And that probably threw UVA off.
I thought so too. I thought Tech doubled Kimora Johnson. And I think Tech, that's not something Tech normally does. Like, Tech usually, I think, guards the inbound. So my guess is them switching from, hey, this is how we usually guard it, to, we're not going to guard the inbound. We're going to show a completely different look, and we're going to put 2 players on Kimora Johnson. They might not go to Kimora Johnson because they only need a 2. They might throw it to the rim, but just gets UVA out of whack a little bit. And you saw, I think it was Jillian Brown, she had the inbound, and it kind of, UVA's play kind of just stalled out. And they just had to throw it into Samaya Smith, who's a forward and didn't expect the ball. And she throws it up and misses. And if you're Virginia Tech, job well done on that very last possession defensively.
Carly Wenzel is the primary defender on Kimora Johnson, held her to one first half point. Obviously, Johnson got going in the second half, but either way, a great performance from Carly Wenzel. I want to talk a little bit more about the Cavaliers switching to a zone midway through the second, because that really did trouble the Hokies and kind of spurred the Cavaliers back into the game. Is that any cause for concern for Virginia Tech going into the postseason?
I don't know about that. I mean, there are teams in the past that used to run zone programs. Syracuse basketball under Jim Boeheim. I'm talking men's here. Temple under John Chaney all those years, and you just don't see that much anymore. You see it more of a gimmick, like, oh my gosh, okay, they're putting a run on us. Let's switch to zone for a few possessions and see if we can throw them off and regain the momentum. That's what zone is used for these days. But after seeing it like that in this game, and maybe a little bit of an untraditional zone, I think they'll be better prepared for it if they see it in the future.
Yeah, well, and I think Virginia did it really well against Louisville, too. That's how it won that Louisville game. So this isn't the first time UVA's kind of pulled it out. But UVA was in desperation mode.
Yeah.
I think the Hokies, they weren't great against it, but it was also situationally when they experienced it, I think, because Kyla Freelon was in foul trouble. And Tech, I was actually more concerned a little bit with Virginia Tech's defense, because it got to a point in the second half where UVA was just driving downhill repeatedly. And you have to be able to kind of cut it off and not allow UVA to either get easy shots around the rim or under the rim, and not allow them to get to the foul line. I thought some of Tech's offensive struggles at certain points in that game bled over defensively, and that's where you saw UVA kind of string possessions together. But at the end of the day, Tech in the second half was able to kind of get enough against that zone. You would have liked Tech to be a little bit more efficient against it, but when you're dealing with all these factors, trying to balance it all, I thought Tech settled. Tech, especially with Mel Daly, likes to shoot mid-range shots, and Tech had a couple of them that it just didn't hit. But the trouble with the UVA zone, which is kind of like a 3-2, is they've got two really good bigs on the base of that, and they rebound really well out of it. And it kind of took the Hokies out of second chance opportunities, especially when Freelon wasn't on the floor. So it was kind of just a weird matchup. If you see it again, you'll be better prepared. I don't know that they will. And I also don't know, you take it on a game-by-game basis, right? If the Hokies see Georgia Tech or Florida State this week, neither of those teams is probably going to play zone. They're probably going to play man-to-man like most. So I think you take it with a grain of salt a little bit. I don't know that it will be too necessary to kind of keep in the back of your head come NCAA tournament and whatnot, because the likelihood that you see UVA do that again is rare. Maybe next year, but again, that's going to be a completely different UVA team next year too, so they might shy away from it.
Well, let's talk the NCAA tournament. According to Charlie Cream, the Hokies are currently a 9 seed, and they are playing in Los Angeles, so no movement for the Hokies despite a road quad 1 win, which seemed a little bizarre to me.
I think it really displays the top heaviness of women's basketball as opposed to men's basketball. So if you look at that, they've only got one more quad 1 win than the men's team. They've got fewer quad 2 wins. Their strength of schedule is slightly lower. They are better in the net, but they're in safely as a 9 seed, right? And they do their quads differently in women's basketball because of that, but because the men's game and the women's games are different. I think we've seen much more parity in women's basketball over the last 5 years or so than we did back in the day. I mean, I grew up in an era of women's basketball where UConn was easily the best team, and you could be a borderline top 25 team like Virginia Tech was most years that back then, and you still lose to UConn by 30 every time you play them. I mean, that was just the lack of parity in the game. There's more parity now, but still you've got a number of teams in this league that they just don't put anything into women's basketball, right? And it still hasn't developed at the grassroots level to the extent that the men's game has. So you got to have a really good record to get a top seed in women's basketball, and you've got to have more than 3 quad 1 wins, obviously.
Yeah, I look at the bracketology aspect of it, and you're kind of picking nits a little bit. Like when it comes to like the 8-9 seeds, Virginia Tech is on the 9 line. If you look at the other 8 or 9 seeds, kind of pick your poison a little bit. You know, Virginia Tech is Charlie Cream has them in the first or in the first next 4 in, I believe. Safely in, but it's Iowa State, Virginia Tech, Virginia, Clemson. That's how it was the other day. And it's like part of it's like the teams above Virginia Tech have been fairly consistent.
Yeah, normally you see 22-8 with a 12-6 conference record. I'm thinking like 6 seed or something like that. But it's just a little bit different with the women's game.
Yeah, I mean there's some solid teams above Virginia Tech. If for example, if you take USC's an 8 seed. USC's only 17-12, but has played a very, very, very daunting schedule and has a pretty good record against it. Villanova's also on the 9 line and is 23-6, 16-4 in the Big East. But it's like there are a lot of teams that are in a very similar spot as Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's on the 9 line. It probably has a very comparable resume to just about everyone else on the 8 or 9 line. And so trying to move Tech up, it's difficult. Like, yes, a road win at Virginia is a quadrant 1 game. It's really, really good, and it kind of solidifies you. Honestly, in my opinion, it maybe widens the gap between, like, Virginia Tech and Virginia on that, but you don't see that, if that makes sense. You don't see that when you look at the bubble. You see Virginia Tech, Virginia. Well, probably widens the gap a little bit between Virginia Tech as a 9 and Virginia as a 10.
They're a 10. That was going to be my question.
That's Virginia right now. The difficult part is there's not really a ton of room for the Hokies to move up because the teams above have not really slipped up, if that makes sense.
And their resumes are almost exactly the same.
Correct. Virginia is currently projected as a 10 seed to play Tennessee in Ann Arbor because Michigan is the 2 seed in that region. So the Hokies are a 9, Virginia's a 10. Clemson's right there on the 10 line as well, and Clemson lost big to, I think it was Cal the other day. But it's just weird because you would expect Hokies to move up, but there's not really room for it. Like, yes, a win against Virginia is big, but I think a lot of these bracketologists are looking at it and projecting and going, I don't expect that win to move Virginia Tech above these teams, if that makes sense.
And I think when you look at the net rankings of those quad 1 and 2 wins, the highest number on there is 36, right? So they've got some good wins, but they don't have any wins where you're like, oh, wow, Virginia Tech's really good to beat that team, right?
You could see it this week if the Hokies beat North Carolina in the ACC tournament.
That's one that could move them up in the field. You would hope it would move them up past number 8 to number 7 because it doesn't really matter if you're the 8 or the 9, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't matter at all.
All right. Well, let's talk the ACC tourney. Right now, Virginia Tech starts on day 2 as the number 6 seed facing the winner of number 11 Georgia Tech and number 14 Florida State. VT has already beaten both of those squads this year. Then with a win, the Hokies play number 3 UNC, where they narrowly lost to an OT. Guys, I don't know about you, and you mentioned it earlier. I think this is arguably best case scenario for a draw for Virginia Tech.
Well, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want to play Duke, Louisville, or NC State, even though NC State's higher seeded than UNC. I feel like UNC is a better matchup for the Hokies, and I think we saw that play out on the court this year, even though Tech lost those games. I don't worry about UNC. I don't think the double bye really becomes a factor until you get to the semifinals. So I don't think that's a huge issue in the quarterfinals if Virginia Tech were to make it, which I think they will, playing either Georgia Tech or Florida State. But yeah, I mean, if If I had my choice of who to play in the quarterfinals amongst those top 4, it would be UNC.
And you include Notre Dame in there too. I mean, I wouldn't want to. I would
I
avoid
wouldn't want to play
Notre
them
Dame
right now,
too,
yeah.
and Hokies do, and they're also not in the 8-9 game. Virginia Clemson is honestly winner feels really good about making the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
Probably loser does not,
Mm-hmm.
because they're both next to each other on the bubble. This is honestly best case scenario, I think, for the Hokies. You get a Georgia Tech team you just beat in Castle Coliseum 2 weeks ago. You just saw them. Honestly, just a little bit over a week ago, actually. Florida State is the 14 for a reason, and you hammered them in December. Way back, long time ago, I know, but that is a matchup I think that Virginia Tech should really like. Whichever one of those teams you get. Georgia Tech can pose some problems, but Virginia Tech just showed it can win that game. The only weird thing is that the tournament's in Duluth, and if you're playing Georgia Tech, that it might be the home team, quote unquote. I don't know how many Georgia Tech fans would actually be there. I would expect maybe more fans to potentially
I think there'll be more Virginia Tech fans there than Georgia Tech fans.
Well, I was
going to
say I would expect more fans for a Georgia Tech Virginia Tech ACC tournament game, more fans to be at the Georgia Tech Virginia Tech baseball series this weekend, which is in Atlanta. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a game you should win, and then you get North Carolina, a team that you should have beaten. You took to overtime in Castle Coliseum about 2 weeks ago, and that's a matchup out of the top 5 teams in the league: Duke, Louisville, Carolina, NC State, and Notre Dame. That's the team Virginia Tech matches up with best. And if the Hokies could go down there and play very similarly, kind of a hard-nosed, grinded-out game, honestly another slugfest of sorts where it's going to come down to the wire and you make one more play than Carolina does, if you can get a win like that, that is a stamp on your resume. I think that opportunity is there for that. And if the Hokies could get that win, I don't know that they could move up to the 7 line, but you're probably saying they're moving up at least to the 8. Again, not that makes much of a difference between the 8 and the 9.
What's more important is that they go to Nashville, right, David?
I would love it. Well, and that's the other thing. If the difficult part is if you're an 8 or a 9 seed, you're playing at a number 1 seed. Right now, that's either UCLA, South Carolina, UConn, or Texas. If Vanderbilt and Texas will probably play in the semifinals in the SEC tournament, and the winner of that game will probably be the other number 1 seed. So maybe you end up in Nashville. That'd be a great trip, but it's all kind of semantics a little bit because you're on the 8-9 line right now. Doesn't really matter because, unless I guess for matchup purposes, but whichever 1 seed you draw is going to be very, very difficult nonetheless. But if the Hokies can make a little bit of a run, Louisville's looked susceptible too lately. Just got beat by Virginia. Hokies beat Syracuse earlier this year. So if you could make a little bit of a run here, it would not surprise me. I think this bracket shakes out pretty well for them. I'm excited to kind of get down to Duluth and see what happens.
All right. Well, guys, that'll do it for us this week on the TSL Basketball Show. What's coming up on Tech Sideline this week? I'm
doing my half-star ratings for the recruiting class. That'll be on the site later today on Tuesday. Maybe by the time you've watched this podcast.
We recorded a podcast with James Franklin last night.
Yep.
That came out on your feeds earlier today. Thought it went really well.
Yeah, it did.
We've got men's basketball tonight, football interviews tonight with
It's a long day,
assistant
man.
coaches.
9 o'clock game.
We're recording Talking with Teal tomorrow morning, and I'm head down to Duluth for a couple of days, so it's gonna be busy. Nick, what else is coming up audio video wise?
Nothing crazy. We got the Friday Q&A on Friday, so continue to submit questions. You can put them in the comments of this section as well. And then, just go watch the video with Franklin. That's fantastic. Got him for 30 minutes. We nailed it in all 30 minutes. It was a great interview, and it was a fun time to have him in here. Really surreal, honestly. I was just sitting there thinking, that's James Franklin. That's kind of strange. But it was great. Glad to have him in here.
Yeah. All right. We'll be sure.
We all forget, man, I'm really not supposed to like you because I spent all those years not liking him when he was at Penn State because he recruited so well, right? So it's weird to have him on the podcast from that standpoint. I didn't tell him that when he was in it.
Well, all right. Be sure to like, subscribe, refer the show to a friend. Check us out on our socials at Tech Sideline, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. We have it. Also, check out these guys' articles on techsideline.com. For Chris Coleman and David Cunningham on set, Nick Brown behind the scenes as always, I'm Robert Bateman, and we'll see you guys on the next edition of the TSL Basketball Show.